Welcome to this session of e-learning. The topic for this particular session is personal versus human resources management. We will try to understand that how the personal and human resources management relate to each other, how they are different to each other. To understand the linkage between personal and human resources management, we have to look into the evolution of human resources management, how the subject human resources management has evolved over a period of time in our country, in the Indian context. So we have to look back, not into the very long back, not into the ancient part of the history, not even to the medieval part of the history, but we will look into the modern Indian history as how the human resources management as a subject has evolved. So we will start with 1929. 1929 was a landmark year in terms of evolution of human resources management activities. 1929 was the year when the then British government set up a commission, Royal Commission on Labour. That was by the then British Government of India. So GOI stands for the Government of India, and then 1929 the government was the British government. Let us understand that why the government was required to set up a commission to look into the issues of the labor and what were the recommendations. 1929 was the year, and during that period there were a lot of conflict going on between the workers and the management. The mill factories, textile factories in Bombay, in the Ahmedabad area. So a lot of conflict resulted into some violent protest by the workers. There was law and order problem. So the government was forced to look into the issue and come up with a solution to that. It was found by the commission that most of the time the problem is about the basic facilities at the workplace. Workers would have to demand and ask for the basic amenities at the workplace. I'm referring to the drinking water facility, proper ventilation at the workplace, proper lighting arrangement. The basic facilities like these were also missing at the workplace, and workers had to demand for this. Of course, there were other issues which relate to compensation, their wages, and the other issues which relate to their employment, like what would be the policy in terms of appointing the new people or laying off the people or asking the people to leave the organization. So focusing on these basic issues, the commission recommended that every organization which employs people must have a dedicated employee who will look into the issues of the workers, and that's why mostly it was the laborers who were demanding for these kind of solution to the workplace problems. So it was referred that there should be an officer to look into the labor issues, and the officer was named as labor officer. So within 2 years of setting up the commission, 1931 was the year when labor officers were appointed, and it was required by the government norm, government guideline, that every factory having 50 or more than 50 number of people must have the labor officers. This was the beginning of human resources management activities, because until that time there was no dedicated individual who will look into the people issues, the workers issues. There was no HR department, no personal department, there was no even individual dedicated to look after the problem of the workers. So that is how we say that it was a beginning in the modern Indian context of the HR function in India. Now let us understand that what was the scope of the labor officers. When labor officer had to be appointed, he must have some job, some work to be given. So the job given to the labor officers were coming up with the employment rules, employment policies, under what circumstances the people, the workers can be dismissed from the job, how to improve the work conditions at the workplace. So these were the basic activities to start with under the labor officers. And this practice continued for a long time, almost 14 years. And then 1945 was the year when the labor officers got redesignated as welfare officers. Now, the journey from labor officers to welfare officers talks about the validity of the recommendation of the Royal Commission and its utility at the workplace. So it was realized that yes, there was a need of dedicated staff, dedicated people to look into these issues, and subsequently it was also realized that only the employment, dismissal and the working conditions are not the only issues which bother the people at the workplace, but there are many other issues, and these issues should also bring part of the officer looking after the people affairs, the people issues. So 1945, it was not only a kind of change in the terminology from labor officers to the welfare officer, but the scope of responsibility was also enhanced. Over and above the responsibilities which were given to the labor officers, additional responsibilities were given to the welfare officers, and these additional responsibilities were looking into the housing problem, the accommodation facility to the people at the workplace, providing them some kind of medical facility, medical services, and recreational activities. So today, those of you who are working or otherwise also, if you know, these are the standard HR practices at the workplace. People are supposed to be given the house rent allowance if they are not given the company accommodation. Medical services or medical reimbursement are a standard practice. Providing the recreational facility was also the need realized by the companies, because most of the people who were working in factory environment, they were placed at far off place. They were not near or closer to the city or even a semi-urban area. It could be quite an isolated area. So there the person would not have the means or the facilities to entertain themselves. So while people are required to stay far off from the nearest city or the district headquarter, how the people would fulfill their social needs? So creating the provision for that, so creating some kind of club, creating some kind of teams which should have some kind of sports, entertainment and other facilities, and this was supposed to rejuvenate, this was supposed to refresh them so that they don't get just bored out of the work and no way of or no means of entertainment being provided to them. So the point you have to take away from this particular lecture, that the basic or the basic HR activities, looking into the housing issues, medical issues, recreational activities, coming up with the employment guidelines, the employment norms, the disciplinary procedures to dismiss the people, improving the work conditions, these we can refer as the basic HR activities or the personal policies practiced during those times. These were developed with the intervention of the then British government in the pre-independence era in India. Let us go further, that how it evolved further. 1946 and 1947, these 2 years are the landmark years in further evolution of the HR practices. Industrial Disputes Act and Factories Act, these acts were introduced to protect some of the rights of the workers. So the welfare officers were given more authority, more power. Their scope of work was further broadened, and they were now to perform the additional activities like management of the leave of the workers, wages, bonus and retirement benefits, competition, and increased size of business. Now you have to understand that this enhancing the scope of the welfare officers happened in what context? The business after the independence was growing. Companies were trying to attract the talent. They were competing because the supply of the talented people were not as much as was the need of the industry during the post-independence era after 1947. So it was for the first time that companies started competing with each other, and they were trying to attract the talented people to work for them. So these were the additions, but further during the 60s, late 60s and the early 70s, due to the industrial policy of the then government of India, led by the first Prime Minister of our country, Pandit Nehru, who was very industry oriented, and he was having a very clear thought and understanding that India can't just be left to continue with the agricultural dependability. So industry and the growth of industry was the focus of the government. Industry was growing, and with the growth of the industry, the demand for skilled people, demand for the qualified people who would have the skills to perform at the workplace, they were in great demand, but supply was not as per the demand. So in the post-independence era, when India got independent, India was trying to build up its industry. It was a very serious problem of where to get the right people, how to get the talented people, how to reach out to them, how to attract them to work for. Because remember, during those days, people were not very attracted to work in people who belonged to the well-off families, well-to-do families. They were not very keen to take up a job. Doing a job was considered something not very prestigious in the society. They preferred to manage their own agricultural activities or their own business setup. So people who had the skill, they were also not coming forward to get employed, work for other company. So given that kind of context, the companies were really feeling the crunch as to how to attract the talent. So need for attracting and retaining the right people, that became a major challenge during the 60s and throughout 70s. And that forced the companies to come up with the policies, to come up with the plans as how to attract the good people to work for them. So personal policies further evolved in the post-independence era due to the increased demand of the skilled human resources in the government and private sector domestic companies in the country. So due to this growth of business, growth of the industry, companies thought that yes, we must have certain HR policies so that we are able to attract and retain the good people. So for the first time in the history of India, I'm referring only to the modern part of the Indian history. So during that period, HR planning, recruitment and selection, training and development, performance and potential appraisal, internal mobility, compensation management, these all were for the first time introduced. Companies for the first time came up with very well developed policies and the procedure to attract and retain people. They needed these kind of policies so that the good people get attracted to work for the company, and those who come to work, they continue to work for the company. And that is how the welfare officers graduated from welfare activities to the personal manager. So this was the evolution of personal management. Coming back to performance and potential appraisal, you might be wondering that what is this potential appraisal? Potential appraisal is assessing the ability of a person to take up higher responsibilities or a different set of responsibilities. Performance appraisal is all about doing the actual assessment of the performance delivered on the job. As we go along, as we continue to cover more and more topics, you will have more detailed understanding on each of these topics. The point you have to remember from this learning is increased domestic competition. Remember that evolution of all the great policies, great procedure have been mostly forced on the companies due to the business environment, due to the competition in the marketplace. So human resource management has also evolved due to increased competition in the marketplace. Because with the increase in the competition, companies initially were trying to compete in the market by having better technology, high-end machines, better quality machinery and the material, and also largely they were depending on their financial strength. But over a period of time, they realized that it's the people, it's the human resources which can actually give a competitive edge to the company. So increased domestic competition to attract and retain talent led to a formulation of policies for important sub-functions of personnel management. These are the sub-functions as we have discussed about recruitment selection, training and development, performance management, compensation management. These specific functions within HR further evolved. So this was the evolution of personnel management. So from labor officers to the welfare officers, from welfare officers to the personnel managers, and now you will understand that how the personnel managers evolved from the personnel management to the human resources management. So let me give you the context. During the later part of 80s, foreign companies were showing interest in the Indian economy. 1991 was a landmark year when the government of India, led by then the late Prime Minister Mr. Narasimha Rao, our current Prime Minister Mr. Manmohan Singh, Dr. Manmohan Singh was the then Finance Minister, and they took a very, very bold decision of liberalizing the Indian economy. Until 1991, the Indian economy was protected from the foreign competition. All the domestic companies operating in India, whether in public sector or private sector, they were protected from these foreign big multinational companies, because multinational companies were not allowed to come and operate in the country and compete in the market. So the competition largely until 1991 was limited among the domestic companies. But 1991, when the government took the decision to open up the boundary of India to allow the foreign multinational company to come and compete, then any company which should enter a new market will enter a new country. They will set up the business, but setting up the business does not only mean setting up the infrastructure, bringing in the machine, having the well-developed procedures, but they need people, and no foreign company can afford to bring all the people from their own country or from other country. They have to create employment for the locals. So obviously when the foreign companies started coming to the country, they needed people to work for them, and they started looking for the people who had the experience of working in the similar business area or the similar industry or in the similar processes. The result, the Indian companies were not only struggling to compete in the market, but they were also struggling to retain their good people, to get the good people from the campuses, which were easy until that time to get the good people to work for them. Now the good people, the talented people, were all having a different choice, different preference to work for the MNCs, the foreign non-Indian multinationals who were setting up their operations in the country. So Obviously, the Indian companies are started losing their people, the good people, the talented people, to their foreign competitors, and that was the another phase, another stage of evolution of human resource management, when the companies started coming up with better HR practices, coming up with a better work environment, more growth opportunities, better compensation to retain the people and attract the new people to work for them. And that is the time when personal managers evolved as the manager human resources management. So I gave you the background information about the evolution of personal management as a human resources management, and the people who were responsible to manage these activities, they were now called human resources managers. The point you have to remember, personal management evolved as human resources management as a proactive function, largely due to increased competition in the post-liberalized era. There is a term which is referred as LPG. LPG, each letter of this has the meaning like L for liberalization, P for privatization, and G for globalization. So Indian economy was liberalized, privatization was encouraged, privatization of the business entity, and globalization, bringing in the global companies to operate in India. So that was a landmark event, decision, which changed the whole scenario of the business, the way the business was conducted. Now the competition was not only fought in the marketplace, but also at the workplace in terms of how to retain your people. Otherwise, the people will be lured away, will be taken away by the competitors. The example, South Korean electronic majors, the companies like LG, companies like Samsung, these companies came to India during the mid-90s, 94, 95, at the time when these companies were contemplating and setting up their operations in India. That was the time when electronic industry in India was doing well, was growing, and the companies like Onida, Videocon, BPL, these companies were the market leader in some of the product segments. Like color television, Onida was the market leader in the urban part of the country. After LG and Samsung came to the country, these companies started losing their good people. The employees of Videocon, the employees of Onida, the employees of BPL started leaving these companies, and they were joining the companies like Samsung and LG. So if LG and Samsung are the market leaders in India, it is not only that they came here with better technology, they came with the better processes, or their quality system, their machinery, or the financial strength was much better than the Indian companies, most of the Indian companies, but the fact that they could afford to have the cream of the people, the talent among the people to work for them. So when you lose talent, you lose business. Technology, machinery, financial resources, they have their importance, but they have the limitation, because access to technology, access to machinery, and up to some extent you can say that even procuring the financial resources is not that difficult now. You can buy them from the market, you can arrange them. But even with the best of the resources, best of the technology, if you don't have the best of the people to work for you, then the company is not going to grow. So it's like a situation that whether you have the competition in the marketplace and you are just trying to push the technology or the process, no, it can't be owned. The market has to be understood, and delivered as per the need of the customers, the product, the services the company is into. You have to deliver as per the need of the people, and there you need to apply your brain. The people who have that kind of ability, they can analyze the things for the company, they can take the decisions, they can make the things happen at the workplace. That is the people. So recognition of the importance of human resources increased, and people were given more and more recognition, and that is how the human resources management evolved. Now let us understand that how these two are different from each other. How the personal management, when we say personal management evolved as human resources management, then how the two are different from each other. So let us understand that in the coming slides. We have a few points, and on these points we will try to differentiate. So the first, let us start with orientation. Personal management is maintenance oriented, while human resources management, and here the term which I am referring, D, the human resources development. HRD is a part of human resources management which focuses on the development aspect of HR management. So human resource management is development oriented. If you look at the structure of the two activities, the two departments, personal operated like an independent function in the organization. They didn't have much of the communication or the linkages with the other functional departments like marketing and sales, production, finance and accounts. They operated mostly in isolation. Human resource management department consists of interdependent parts. They would relate to every function of the organization. They would try to work very closely with them. Like for example, earlier if there was vacancy in the production department would only be able to raise the vacancy, and then it was left to the personal. Personal didn't allow or didn't like anybody's involvement, including the production head, in recruitment and selection of the people. Now when the recruitment and selection has to be done, the people from the function, the technicals, have to be part of the recruitment and selection activity. The another important aspect of it is that personal, as you understand, would have the sub functions like recruitment selection, performance management, training and development, rewards, or the compensation management. So even these sub functions were not related to each other. Each and every activity was conducted in isolation. Like there was no linkage between performance appraisal and rewards. Somebody who has done a very good job throughout the year, not necessarily that he will have higher increment or more incentives. Now with human resources management, the sub functions are all related to each other. They have to be linked to each other. So rewards have to be performance linked. If you have to train people, develop people, you have to take the feedback from the performance appraisal. What are the strengths of the employee? What are the weaknesses of the employee? And in the areas of the weaknesses, you have to prioritize the delivery of the training. The strengths have to be further strengthened. You relate the training with the individual's requirement, job requirement, and the organizational requirement. So that way, human resources management is more systematic, more interrelated, and they work in close coordination with all the other functions of the organization. Philosophy. Personal was reactive. It used to respond as and when the events would happen, but HRD is proactive. It tries to anticipate and get ready with appropriate responses. Personal management, the term personal management normally refer to the old set of maintenance oriented HR activities, while human resources management, because it links up its objectives, the functional objective of HR with that of the organizational objective. So that way it is a strategic in nature. The other points on which we would try to understand the differences between personal and human resources management. Personal was the responsibility of the personal department or the personal manager. It was very exclusive to them. But human resources management is the responsibility of all the managers. Let me clarify the term human resources development. HRD is that part of HR function, that part of human resources management which focuses on the development aspect of the people and the organization. So that way human resources management, the scope of human resource management is much broader. And it was considered that it's the responsibility not only of the HR manager but of every manager. For example, if performance appraisal has to be carried out for the employees in the organization, then performance appraisal, though is an HR function, has to be carried out by the respective managers in all the departments. Let me make it more specific. Sales executives, if are reporting to the sales manager, then sales manager knows it much better about the performance of the team members. So even though performance appraisal technically being an HR function, but actual appraisal has to be carried out for the sales executive by the sales manager. Likewise, for the accounts executive, the accounts manager. For the production executives, the production supervisors, it should be the production head or the production manager. HR, human resources department, the core responsibility now is to design the policy, develop the procedures, come up with a method, train everyone, all the manager on these policies, procedures, methods, and let them practice it. And while they practice it, they have to monitor that it should be uniformly practiced across the organization so that there is no discrimination. Motivators. Personal emphasized on monetary rewards, while human resource development would look for the other ways, other means of rewarding people so that they remain motivated. So it would focus on how to make the job interesting. So how to design the jobs which should make the people more interested in discharge of their duties. How to improve creativity and the problem solving skill of the people, and the focus was not only on developing the technical skills. Empowerment, how to make people feel empowered by giving them more authority, by allowing them to take their own decision, by asking them to resolve their own problem, which would have the sanctity or the sanction from the seniors. So HR activities are not only to be performed by the HR manager or by the HR department, but by everyone in the organization. Another couple of points on which we would differentiate HRM with that of the personal. Personal improved the performance, and it believed strongly that if you have to improve the performance of the individual employees, then they have to be satisfied. You have to improve their satisfaction level, their morale level. That is true, nothing wrong with it, but human resource development had a broader view on that. And that was that better use of human resources leads to improved satisfaction and morale of the people. Aims of the personal, aims of the HR activities. Personal tries to improve the efficiency of individuals, the people, and the administrative aspect of personal management. And that's why it was sometimes it's referred as personal administration. But HRD is development oriented, and it not only focuses on developing the individuals but developing the organization as a whole, developing and building the culture of the organization. So HRD is obviously development oriented, It focuses on both individual as well as organizational development. The new human resources management, which is different from the old practices. If you have to understand the new HRM, then let us go through a couple of a definition of the new HRM. Human resource management is a broad concept which refers to the philosophy, the policies, the procedures and the practices used in any organization to manage the people, to manage all people, not only the workers. Remember, personnel was more hooked up, more focused, more concerned about the non-executive people. But human resources management finds that it's not only the workers, the non-executive, but it's the executive cadre which also needs to be taken care of, which also needs to be developed. So it's about each and everyone in the organization, irrespective of the hierarchy, irrespective of whether someone belongs to the management cadre or a non-management cadre. Human resource management, let us understand it from different perspective, from the perspective of the kind of activities which has to be carried out while discharging the HR responsibilities, is all about the systematic control of a network of fundamental organizational processes which affect and involve all organizational members, and these processes include human resources planning, job and the work design, job analysis, staffing, training, development, performance appraisal and review, compensation and reward, organizational development, employee protection and representation. As I said earlier, you will have more detailed discussion on each of these topics. Right now we are just going through the introductory phase about the evolution of the new HR. So human resources management department is primarily responsible for coming up with the policies, procedures and methods, but its actual practice is by everyone in the organization. The new HRM is different from personnel because personnel was more of support oriented, more of the worker oriented, while human resources management is a strategic in nature. It's not only a support function. So it analyzes and solves the problems of the organization from profit oriented and not just a service oriented point of view. Assessing and interpreting cost or benefit of HRM issues. Training and development, if is a requirement, then how much investment in what kind of training, who should be the people to be trained first, and how this training is going to add on value in terms of improved performance, increased profitability for the company, improved customer satisfaction. So that is how it has to be addressed now. Earlier, it was more of a routine activity. Using the planning models that include realistic, challenging, or specific and meaningful goals. Training the HR staff and emphasizing the strategic importance of HRM and the importance of contributing to the firm's profit. So if it's a strategic, it has to be directly linked to the organizational objectives. So let us sum it up. HRM policies, procedures in India have gradually evolved from labor relations to welfare, welfare to personal, personal to HRM. So that's the linkage. So more evolved functions of human resources management is referred as HRM, while the old set of activities which was more labor oriented, more maintenance oriented, reactive, these kind of functions are referred as personal management or personal activities. HRM is strategic and development oriented, while a scope of HRM is not confined to the people management, but it facilitates ethical and social responsible conduct of the business by the organization. These are some added dimensions to the HRM practices. HRM over and above managing the people and the people affairs in the organization would now also take up the added responsibility of helping the organization do the business in a more ethical, in a more socially responsible manner. So that's all for this topic.